Now, I'm talking about the role of religion in this conflict. This is, at base, a political problem. It began on both sides as an essentially political problem about a land. Zionism, for example, began as a rebellion against religious Judaism, Orthodox Judaism, which regarded it as an impious attempt to secularize one of the most sacred symbols of Judaism, which was the land. But because this secular problem has been allowed to fester, religion has got drawn into the conflict on all sides. The Arab-Israeli question has become symbolic. It stands for something more than itself in many people's minds, and that is what we're up against when we are thinking about a just solution. Because people, even in our highly rational world, continue to regard history mythically, to look at the events of history as a divine drama. And even though the number of people who might hold the most extreme forms of this view are small, in diluted form, this affects many, many believers in all three of the monotheistic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. It's become symbolic. For Jews, Israel is sacred because it represents the revival of the Jewish people after the Holocaust. They say Jewish Jerusalem coming up like a phoenix out of the ashes of Auschwitz. And it is therefore sacred, and sacred whether they are believers or not, something that is so central to identity that it's unnegotiable. Similarly, for many Muslims, the situation of Palestine has become symbolic of everything that's gone wrong for Muslims in the modern world. The fact that 750 Palestinians could lose their homes and the world does nothing. And it's regarded as a sign of the impotence and humiliation of Muslims in the modern era. And for Christians too, especially in the United States, Palestine-Israel is extremely symbolic. The situation is different in Europe. In Europe, there's a much better understanding of the politics of the Middle East. The Brits, for example, are remarkably obtuse about the religious questions. In America, they have a better understanding of the religious questions, but not much grasp on the politics. So, I mean, people actually ask me, university professors, actually ask me, where do the Palestinians come from? And look astonished when I say Palestine, and there's a sort of sense that they've marauded in off the desert in some place. And these are, as I say, are educated people, but there's huge ignorance about the political issues here. But I want to look at some of the more extreme manifestations of the kind of piety that has grown up around the Israel-Palestine question. And to start with the Christian right here in the United States, the first fundamentalist movement of the modern world. Fundamentalism, it's an unfortunate term, but it was the term chosen by the Christian reformers at the turn of the 20th century to describe their reform movement. They were going to go back to what they called the fundamentals of their religion. So it's legitimate to call them fundamentalists, it's their name of choice. Now, fundamentalists deplore the relegation of God and religion to the sidelines of modern secular culture. And their objective is to drag religion back to center stage. And they've achieved some considerable success in this. In the middle of the 20th century, it was regarded as virtually axiomatic that religion would never again play a major role in world events, that secularism was the coming ideology. But that's certainly changed. Religion has made a comeback, but it's not always very healthy religion. Now, central to the ideology of the Christian right is their apocalyptic vision of the end of days. They are convinced that God is so frustrated by the world that he can only redeem it by launching a terrible end-time catastrophe. It's a vision of intense despair. And most of these fundamentalist movements or these extremist movements are rooted in a great fear, a sense of humiliation. This ideology was the rapture ideology, was actually created by a British theologian of sorts in the 19th century. He got no takers in England, but when he crossed the Atlantic and came here, he went down a treat, and his rapture ideology is central to the Christian right, and plays, I think, a great role in public policy. This is a very significant voting lobby. People can't ignore this if they want to court people's votes. The theory is, I'm sure you're familiar with it, just before the last days arrive, the born-again Christians, who the only true believers, will be raptured, taken up into heaven, so that they will escape the tribulation of the last days. And they'll have, as it were, a kind of ringside seat, and where they can regard the sufferings of the people who have humiliated them in their lifetime. Again, it is based, this theory, on a literal reading of the book of Revelation. Reading Revelation in a new way. I'm not a fan of the book of Revelation. I think it's a most unfortunate scripture. But it was never intended to be a timetable of Armageddon. People didn't read scripture in a literal way before the modern era. This is a completely modern take upon it. It is essential that for Jews stay in their land. For otherwise, if they don't fulfill the ancient prophecies that says that the Jews will be back in their own land, Jesus can't return. So the Christian right are very staunch Zionists, but they are also anti-Semitic, because when Antichrist comes, he will kill all the Jews in Israel who have not been baptized. And so it imagines a terrible genocide at the end of time.